Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching this from? Let's see which city shows up the most. It was a quiet Saturday morning. The kind where everything feels calm, peaceful. The sun was out and I was just finishing my coffee on the front porch. Birds were chirping, sprinklers ticking nearby. The kind of day that makes you feel like nothing could possibly go wrong. My daughter was coming over for the weekend. She hadn't been home in weeks. Her job keeps her busy. Really busy. She works long hours, always on call, and rarely talks about what she does. But I knew she needed a break. So I told her, just come home. Rest. I'll cook your favorite. She laughed over the phone and said she was on her way. Around 9:30 a.m., I heard a car pull into the driveway. Her black SUV rolled in, smooth and steady just like always. She stepped out wearing jeans, a black jacket, and sunglasses. Nothing about her looked threatening. She looked like anyone's daughter. But before I could even wave or walk toward her, I saw something I'll never forget. A man, mid-40s maybe, rushed across the street. He wore a reflective vest, a cheap one, and had a walkie-talkie clipped to his belt. His posture was tense, like he was chasing someone. His face looked angry, panicked, like he was on some kind of mission. He yelled out, "Stop. You don't belong here." His voice cut through the air like a blade. Sure. Accusatory. My daughter turned slowly, calm as ever. She didn't look scared. Just confused. She held her car keys in one hand and raised the other slightly, palms up, like she was trying to understand what was happening. "This is my father's house," she said, her voice steady. "I'm visiting him." The man didn't back off. He stepped closer. Too close. "You don't look like you live here. We've had break-ins lately. Show me some ID." I stood up from my porch chair, confused, angry, ready to yell. But before I could say a word, he did something that made my blood run cold. He reached for his hip, pulled out a gun. He pointed it straight at her. Time froze. I felt my heart slam against my chest. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A man, claiming to be HOA security, standing in my front yard, aiming a weapon at my daughter. My daughter. I shouted. I ran. I don't even remember what I said, just noise, panic, desperation. But she didn't move. She didn't flinch. She didn't scream. She just looked at him straight in the eyes and said nothing. Completely still. That's when I saw something change in her. Just a flicker. A tiny shift in her stance. Like a switch flipping inside. Calm but focused. Alert. Ready. And this man, this self-declared security guard? He had no idea who he was dealing with. To him, she was just a woman. Another face he didn't recognize. Another person he thought didn't belong in the neighborhood. And for some reason, that was enough for him to draw a gun. He had no idea he was pointing that weapon at someone who had disarmed real criminals. Who had walked into buildings where every second could be her last. Who had trained with elite forces, led tactical teams, handled hostage rescues, and conducted raids in places most people never want to think about. But here, in our quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, she was being treated like a threat. Like a suspect. Like she didn't deserve to stand in her own father's driveway. The fear I felt? It was blinding. I couldn't breathe. Every parent's nightmare was playing out in front of me and I couldn't stop it. Neighbors peeked through windows. Some stepped outside, unsure of what was happening. One woman across the street was already on the phone, probably with 911. Another just stared, frozen. I could see my daughter's mind working. Calculating. Reading his body language. Measuring distance. Breathing slow and controlled. She wasn't going to reach for her own weapon. Not unless he pulled that trigger. But she was ready. She trained for situations far worse. Still I kept thinking, this isn't war. This isn't a cartel raid. This is home. This is supposed to be safe. And yet, a man with no badge, no training, no right, was threatening her life like it meant nothing. I yelled again. She's my daughter. This is her home. Put the gun down. My voice cracked. My legs shook. The man didn't lower his weapon. His hand trembled slightly, like he realized he'd gone too far, but his pride wouldn't let him admit it. And my daughter? She took one step forward. Just one. Her tone changed. Not angry. Not afraid. Just firm. "I'm going to need you to lower your weapon. Right now." He blinked. Confused. Like he suddenly felt unsure. Like something in her voice told him this wasn't a game anymore. She reached slowly into her back pocket and pulled out her ID. Not just a driver's license. Her federal credentials. The gold badge. The laminated card. She held it up without breaking eye contact. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Tactical Response Unit. You could almost hear the sound of his heart dropping into his stomach. He stumbled back a step. His eyes widened. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. For a second he looked like a child caught doing something terribly wrong. He lowered the gun. Neighbors gasped. A few people came closer, whispering, asking what just happened. One man called out, "Is she okay?" I wanted to scream. Of course she's not okay. No one should have to face that. And yet she didn't crumble. Didn't cry. She tucked her ID away, exhaled slowly, and turned toward me. "I'm fine, Dad," she said. "Are you okay?" I wasn't. I was shaking. My hands, my knees, my voice, it all betrayed me. Because even though she stood tall, steady, unbroken, I saw it in her eyes. That look. The one she gets when she's seen too much. When something inside her shuts down just enough to keep her going. The man tried to explain. Mumbled something about neighborhood watch, and new faces, and just doing his job. But nobody cared. He wasn't law enforcement. He wasn't trained. He wasn't even registered as a licensed guard. Just a man with a vest and a weapon, hired by a group of neighbors who thought they could play police. And now, he had pointed a gun at someone whose life is dedicated to protecting others. Someone who spends every day making sure the right people carry that kind of responsibility. I still can't believe it happened. That someone could look at my daughter and see a threat. That someone could see a black SUV, a confident woman in sunglasses, and decide she didn't belong. That's what hurts the most. Not just the danger, but the assumption. The rush to judgment. The idea that you can pull a gun because something feels off. She could have reacted differently. She could have taken him down in under 5 seconds. Could have disarmed him, pinned him, and called it self-defense. But she didn't. She stayed calm. Professional. She followed the exact rules she teaches to others in high-stress environments. Even though her own life was on the line. And that's what makes her a true professional. What that man didn't know was that he wasn't just pointing a gun at someone's daughter. He was pointing it at someone who's trained to run toward danger, not away from it. Someone who's risked her life countless times for people she's never met. And yet here, in her father's driveway, her own community treated her like a stranger. That image will stay with me forever. Her standing there, calm and unshaken. Him trembling, realizing what he'd done. And me, just a father, watching it all, wishing I could rewind the moment, protect her like I used to when she was small. But she doesn't need protection anymore. She's the protector now. He didn't say anything for a while. Just stared. Like he was trying to make sense of what he had just heard. Her voice had changed in that moment. It wasn't just calm, it carried weight. That tone didn't belong to a civilian. It didn't come from someone who could be pushed around. It was the kind of voice people don't question. And she didn't raise it. She didn't need to. When she said FBI, the man's hand actually shook. The gun he was holding slowly dipped toward the ground. He was breathing hard, eyes darting from her to me, like he was waiting for someone to tell him it was all a joke. That this wasn't real. But it was. Very real. And it was only then that I realized how close we'd come to something irreversible. She stepped closer, not fast, but deliberate. Every move was measured. Every glance calculated. She was scanning him, checking for signs of instability, signs he might panic, signs he might be about to make a mistake. The kind of mistake that turns a confrontation into a tragedy. She wasn't just reacting. She was leading. He asked, barely a whisper, "You're really FBI?" She nodded once. "I am." She didn't flash the badge again. She didn't need to. That moment had already shifted everything. I think in his mind he expected to meet someone he could intimidate. Someone he could boss around. Someone who'd comply, apologize, maybe even cry. He didn't expect her. The man had no clue who he had just threatened. No clue that the woman standing in front of him had spent her entire adult life learning how to face threats far worse than him. My daughter's career isn't something we talk about often. Not because I'm not proud. I am, more than words can say. But because she can't tell me everything. A lot of it is classified. Dangerous. High level. But I've picked up enough pieces over the years. She joined the FBI young. Fresh out of college. Top of her class. She told me once she didn't want a desk job. She wanted to be in the field. She wanted to make a difference where it really counted. That meant training. Hard, brutal training. I remember when she first started. She would come home with bruises, exhausted, but never once did she complain. She didn't talk much about what went on, but the determination in her eyes told the story. She was learning to shoot, to fight, to negotiate. She was learning how to keep her heart steady in chaos. And then she made it. She became a tactical field agent. Not just regular FBI, but part of the specialized units they send in when things are already bad. The units that go in when others are told to stay back. Over the years I've heard whispers that she's helped take down trafficking rings, that she's led rescue operations in foreign countries, that she's cleared buildings, entered active shooter scenes, and stood in doorways where seconds decide life and death. You wouldn't know it by looking at her. She's quiet, graceful, always composed. But underneath that calm surface is a fighter, honed by years of dealing with the very worst humanity has to offer. And yet, here she was, being threatened in her own father's driveway by a man who thought a neon vest and a pistol made him powerful. If he had known even a fraction of her background, he might have dropped that gun the moment he saw her. But he didn't know. He saw what he wanted to see. A woman. Alone. What he didn't know is that she doesn't just carry a badge, she trains the people who wear them. She teaches tactical response. She writes protocols for high-risk operations. When local agencies need help, they call her team. One time, she called me from an airport after returning from a mission. She didn't say much. Just, "Hey Dad, I'm okay. We got everyone out." I didn't ask questions. I never do. But that night I looked up the news. A hostage situation overseas. Quietly resolved. No names listed. But I knew. She's that kind of person. The kind who never wants the spotlight. The kind who does the right thing because it's right, not because it's easy. Which made watching this man wave a gun in her face all the more surreal. He had no idea how lucky he was that she was the one standing there. Someone else, less trained, more reactive, might have panicked. She didn't. Instead, she did what she's trained to do in every dangerous situation. Stay calm, de-escalate, take control. But what broke me a little was the way she looked at me after it all. Not with fear. Not with anger. But with this quiet apology in her eyes. Like she was sorry I had to see that side of the world she deals with. Like she was sorry that danger had followed her home. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. But in that moment, I felt the weight of everything she carries. All the time she's faced fear without flinching. All the time she's had to be strong, even when she shouldn't have had to. The man kept talking, trying to justify himself. Saying things like, "We've had strangers lately," and she looked suspicious. It was garbage. There was no reason for what he did. She told him firmly, "You are not a police officer. You are not trained. You are not authorized to draw a weapon unless your life is in danger. You do not have the authority to stop people on private property without cause." He tried to cut her off. "I was told to protect the neighborhood." She didn't even blink. With a gun? Against an unarmed woman stepping out of a vehicle? You could have killed someone. He went quiet again. His hands dropped to his sides. You could see the weight of his mistake starting to press down on him. Then she called it in. Her voice calm and clipped. Professional. She gave her name, badge number, location. Described the incident. Within minutes, real officers were on the scene. The man didn't resist. He stood awkwardly by the sidewalk, suddenly stripped of all his self-made authority. The power trip was over. The officers treated her with respect. They knew who she was. They understood what had just happened. And they weren't happy. Turns out, this wasn't his first incident. He had a record, not criminal but complaints. Aggressive behavior. Harassment. The HOA had hired him unofficially, more as a favor than a process. No vetting. No licenses. Just a man with a gun and a sense of control he never should have been given. And now he had pulled that weapon on the wrong person. The officers took statements. Neighbors confirmed what happened. A few even apologized. Said they never knew he was like that. Said they didn't feel safe with him patrolling anymore. But none of it mattered in the moment. Not really. Because no matter what they said, the image stayed burned in my mind. My daughter, standing still, hands visible, as a stranger decided whether or not she looked like she belonged. That kind of judgment, that kind of danger, doesn't just fade. It sits with you. It stays in your bones. She told me later that it wasn't the first time something like this had happened. That in her line of work, people often underestimate her. That sometimes it gives her an edge. But that day? That wasn't the field. That was family. That was personal. And still she handled it with grace. With restraint. With all the discipline the Bureau had ever taught her. Watching her that day, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. She's not just strong. She's not just brave. She's unshakable. And not because she doesn't feel fear, but because she knows how to walk through it. Because in every room, every situation, every crisis, she keeps her head even when others lose theirs. Because even when a weapon is pointed at her chest, she thinks first of de-escalation, not retaliation. And that's something not even the highest training can teach. That's who she is. The next day felt different. The neighborhood looked the same, the sun came up like it always did, and cars rolled down the street like nothing had happened. But I felt it, something invisible had shifted. It's strange how silence can carry weight. There was no shouting, no sirens, no commotion. But under the surface there was tension. People glanced a little longer. Some waved awkwardly. A few didn't meet my eyes at all. I wasn't angry. Not in the way people expect. I wasn't yelling or demanding revenge. I was just tired. Because when something like this happens, it doesn't just pass. It lingers. It changes how you look at familiar things. The mailbox you check every morning. The tree your daughter used to climb. The driveway where she stood, unmoving, while a weapon was aimed at her chest. That image doesn't go away. Later that afternoon she came back. Quiet as always. Not trying to make a scene. Just checking on me, bringing food like she always does when she's worried I haven't eaten. I opened the door and she smiled like nothing was wrong. But I could see it. A crack in her armor. Subtle but there. She placed the bag on the kitchen counter, then sat at the edge of the table. Didn't say much at first. Neither did I. We just sat. Sometimes that's what you need. Not words. Just presence. But then she looked up and asked something I didn't expect. Do you think they'll treat me differently now? Caught me off guard. I asked what she meant. She shrugged, not really looking at me. The neighbors. The HOA. The ones who saw everything. The ones who didn't. I wanted to tell her it didn't matter. That they should have known better. That she had nothing to prove. But she already knew all that. What she really wanted to know was, had this moment redefined her in the eyes of others? Had her calm, her strength, her authority, had all of it made them respect her, or fear her? Because there's a fine line between being admired and being resented. Especially when you're a woman in power. Especially when that power doesn't come from loudness but control. She told me about a moment from her early career. When she had just made it into tactical operations. One of the senior officers had told her, they won't all respect you. Some will pretend. Some will test you. And a few will try to break you. But don't let any of that change the way you stand. She never forgot those words. And now, sitting across from me with sunlight slipping through the blinds, I saw how much those words still mattered. This wasn't just about what happened with that man. This was about years of being measured by her gender before her skill. About being second-guessed. About having to prove herself twice as hard. What the HOA guard did, it wasn't just a random act. It was the surface crack in a deeper wall she's been pushing against her whole life. And now the wall had shown its face again. In a way that could have taken everything from us. She sipped her coffee like it was any other day. But I knew she wasn't okay. I asked her how she felt. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, angry, but not surprised. That hurt. Not because it wasn't true, but because it was. This kind of thing, being threatened, being underestimated, being treated like she didn't belong, this wasn't new. It was just the first time I had seen it with my own eyes. She said she kept thinking about what would have happened if it wasn't her. If it had been someone else. A different woman. Someone without training. Without experience. Someone who would have panicked. She kept replaying that moment. The weight of the gun. The look in his eyes. The hesitation. The decision she had to make, to respond with force or to hold steady. And how close it had all come to going the other way. It haunted her. Not for herself, but for others. She told me about another case she once worked. A young woman, civilian, pulled over late at night. The officer was unstable. The girl got scared. Made a sudden move. That story didn't end well. She said it's stories like that sit heavy in her chest every time something like this happens. Because she knows how quickly it can spiral. How fast you can lose everything, because someone else didn't know how to handle a situation. And that's the part that scared her the most. Not the gun. Not the confrontation. But how easily it could have been someone else. Someone less lucky. She paused for a long time, then said, people think training makes you fearless. It doesn't. It just teaches you how to move through the fear without letting it drown you. That stuck with me. She had faced cartel members. Trained militants. Armed fugitives. But standing in her father's driveway, confronted by a man with too much pride and not enough sense, that's what almost broke her. Because it wasn't supposed to happen here. It wasn't supposed to happen in the place she came to relax. To feel safe. I looked at her, this woman I raised, this woman I used to hold when she scraped her knees, and I saw someone forged in fire. But I also saw the little girl who used to fall asleep in the backseat after softball practice. And I hated that the world still made her fight for basic respect. She stood up eventually, said she had to get going. Duty called. Before she left, she turned and said something simple. But it shook me. I'm okay, Dad. I promise. But next time someone like that crosses a line, I might not be the one they're lucky to get. She didn't say it with anger. Just truth. Because not every FBI agent is like her. Not every trained professional has the restraint she has. And one day, someone might point a gun at the wrong person and not live to regret it. I watched her walk down the driveway, calm, collected, still carrying all that weight on her shoulders, and I realized just how much she holds in silence. All the close calls. All the danger. All the injustice. She carries it with grace. But that doesn't mean it's light. Later that evening I took a walk. Passed by the same spot where it all happened. The patch of concrete where a line had been crossed. Neighbors were out. Some nodded. One lady came up and thanked my daughter for how she handled everything. Said she was brave. I just smiled and said, that's who she is. But inside, I kept thinking about how many people walk past each other without ever knowing what someone's been through. What they carry. Who they really are. That man who pulled the gun, he thought he saw someone ordinary. He couldn't have been more wrong. And now he'll never forget her. Neither will anyone else who watched what happened. Because sometimes, it takes a moment like that to wake people up. To show them what real strength looks like. It's not loud. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't need to boast. It just stands firm. Calm. Unshaken. And when the moment comes, it acts, not out of fear but out of training. Out of instinct. Out of something deeper than ego. That's my daughter. And that day the whole neighborhood got to see who she really is.